AITA for taking my ex-wife to court after she demanded money for her new husband's children? I'm a 38-year-old divorced guy. I have two incredible kids who are my entire world and an ex-wife who seems determined to turn co-parenting into a hostage negotiation. I recently hit my breaking point with her nonsense, but let me back up a bit so this all makes sense. At 27, my life was pretty quiet. I had a decent job. I hit the gym, hung out with my buddies, and minded my own business, drama-free. Then one day, at a barbecue hosted by my friend Caleb, I met my ex, Alyssa. She was across the yard, laughing like she'd stepped right out of a commercial. I made some lame joke about the overcooked burgers, and she laughed. She thought I was funny. 8 months later, we were married. Yeah, I know. Hindsight is 20/20. In the beginning, it wasn't awful. Not amazing, but not a disaster either. Then she got pregnant with our son, Gavin, and I was over the moon. Genuinely the happiest I'd ever been. I still remember the first time I held him. The little guy had my eyes and her nose. I just stood there holding him, swaddled up like a Chipotle burrito, trying not to cry. Those early days were intense. I'd work all day, come home, and still take the night shifts so she could sleep. One night, Gavin just wouldn't stop crying. I walked circles in the living room for almost 3 hours, singing whatever popped into my head. He finally fell asleep on my chest, and I just froze. I didn't want to move and wake him, and honestly, I couldn't have cared less about having to work the next morning. I thought, yep, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. But something changed after those first few weeks. Alyssa grew distant. She started finding fault in everything I did. I'd come home after working overtime to cover baby expenses, and she'd barely look up from her phone. You didn't fold the laundry right. The baby was fussy all day, and you're just getting home now. Must be nice to escape all this. I'd just stand there, exhausted from a 10-hour shift, wondering what happened to us. Still, I kept trying. I'd make breakfast before leaving for work. I took the night shifts with Gavin. I tried to plan date nights. Nothing worked. One night, about 3 months after Gavin was born, I planned a whole surprise. I got my mom to babysit. I made a reservation at the restaurant where we had our first date and even bought that necklace she'd been eyeing before the pregnancy. I was so hopeful, convinced this would be our turning point. I came home early with flowers and told her to get ready. Her reaction? She sighed like I'd just asked her to climb Mount Everest. I don't feel like going out. Can't we just order a pizza? I tried to hide my disappointment. I thought it would be nice to have some time, just the two of us. Mom's already on her way to watch Gavin. She rolled her eyes. Fine, give me 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes turned into an hour of her scrolling on her phone while half-heartedly getting ready. Dinner was painfully awkward. She spent the evening texting, barely speaking to me. When I gave her the necklace, she said, thanks, with the enthusiasm of someone being handed a grocery receipt. Then she asked if we could go home because she was tired. I remember the silent drive back, the necklace box feeling like it was burning a hole in my hand, wondering if this was just a phase or if my marriage was already over. Then, bam, she got pregnant again when Gavin was 1. That's when the real chaos started. She was texting constantly, but the second I walked into the room, she'd flip her phone over. Classic shady behavior. I'd ask who she was talking to, and she'd get defensive. What? Am I not allowed to have friends now? You're so controlling. I wasn't born yesterday. Something was wrong. The knot in my stomach got tighter every day. One night, I got up to check on Gavin and saw the glow of her phone in our dark bedroom. It was 2 a.m. Who texts at 2 a.m. besides someone you're interested in? I didn't say anything, but I started paying closer attention. She'd take her phone to the bathroom, step outside for fresh air, during dinner, all the classic signs. After our daughter, Zoe, was born, things got even more suspicious. One evening, her phone lit up while she was in the shower. A message from some guy named Ethan from work. I miss talking to you too. Not subtle at all. An emotional affair, no doubt. I didn't confront her right away. I watched. She pulled away even more, always on her phone, cold as ice. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I brought it up. Something's wrong. We don't talk anymore. We don't connect. It feels like we're just roommates now. She didn't even flinch. I'm tired. I've carried 2 of your children in 2 years. Sorry if I don't feel like playing happy wife. This isn't a game, I replied. It's about basic respect. She exploded. Maybe you should have thought about that before you got me pregnant again. I stared at her. We both wanted Zoe. Whatever. I'm going to bed. And that's when something broke. I stopped chasing something that wasn't there anymore. I kept showing up for the kids, doing what needed to be done, but I expected nothing from her. She wasn't my partner anymore, just someone I shared a roof with. And honestly, the silence was easier than the constant jabs and the cold shoulder. For months after Zoe was born, I came home from work to find divorce papers on the kitchen table. No discussion, no attempt at therapy. Just, I'm done. I deserve better than this, she told me, standing there like she was the victim. I wanted to scream, to show her the 5 unanswered texts I'd sent her in the last month asking if she was okay, if we could talk, if there was anything I could do. To remind her that I was the one getting up at 3 a.m. with the baby while she was too tired. But I looked at my kids, Gavin barely 2 and Zoe still an infant, and I knew a nasty divorce would destroy them. I remember that day like it's burned into my brain. I'm standing in the kitchen, divorce papers in my hand, and there's this silence, a heavy kind of silence. Gavin is on the floor playing with his blocks. Zoe is asleep in her swing, and I'm just watching the end of the life I thought I was building. The truth is, I had already checked out emotionally a while ago. I looked at her and asked, "So, is there someone else?" "Ethan." She didn't flinch. "This isn't about someone else. This just isn't working between us." It wasn't a denial. I knew my suspicions were right. So I swallowed my pride and agreed to a 50-50 split of everything. Assets, custody, no alimony since we both had decent jobs. I remember signing those papers, feeling like I was tearing off a piece of myself and handing it to her. The hardest part was moving out, setting up a small apartment nearby, and sitting there alone that first night while my kids slept across town. I sat on the floor of that new apartment, with just a mattress and a TV on a crate. I scrolled through pictures of my kids on my phone until the battery died. Then I just sat there in the dark, wondering how my life had fallen apart so quickly. Those early days as a single dad were brutal. I'd be ecstatic to see the kids, then instantly overwhelmed trying to manage a toddler and a baby at the same time. The first time Zoe got sick, I panicked and called my mom at 2 a.m. She calmed me down, told me it was just a fever. I stayed up all night watching her breathe. By morning, she was fine, and I knew I could handle this. The custody exchanges were incredibly awkward at first. We'd meet in a Starbucks parking lot, barely making eye contact as we passed car seats and diaper bags back and forth. Gavin would sometimes cry when I had to leave him, and it broke my heart. Zoe was too little to understand what was happening, but Gavin knew something was wrong. "Why don't you live with us anymore, Daddy?" he asked me one day, his face serious. "How do you explain divorce to a 2-year-old? Mommy and Daddy love you very much, but we decided we'd be better parents living in 2 different houses." He thought about it for a minute. "Do I get 2 rooms?" Kids, man. Incredibly resilient. About a year after the divorce was finalized, Alyssa met a new guy named Brandon. Surprisingly, she didn't go back to Ethan, which told me everything about her true character. This guy, Brandon, walks around like he's God's gift to fatherhood, but he's a part-time marketing consultant, which mostly means he works about 20 hours a week while Alyssa pays most of the bills. They got married when Gavin was 4 and Zoe was just 2, and suddenly my kids had a stepsister, Lila, who was Gavin's age. Then they had another child, Noah, who's now 7. The first time I met Brandon was at preschool pickup. I was helping Gavin with his backpack when this guy, wearing a band t-shirt from a 2016 tour, no joke, walked up with Alyssa. "Hey, you must be the ex," he said, holding out his hand with a smug grin that made me want to punch him. "I'm Brandon. Heard a lot about you." I shook his hand briefly. Wish I could say the same. He laughed. "The kids are great. Gavin's been teaching Lila how to build with Legos. They're inseparable." The way he said it, like he was already claiming my son, made my jaw tighten. But I kept it civil for Gavin. "That's nice. Gavin's always been good at sharing," I said, ruffling my son's hair. I still remember the first time I dropped the kids off at their house after they got married. Alyssa had decorated their front door with a wooden sign that read, "The Johnson Blended Family," with all their first names painted in different colors. My last name, which is also my kid's last name, was nowhere to be seen. I didn't say a word. Just another battle not worth fighting. The real gut punch came when Gavin came home one weekend and casually mentioned, "Daddy Brandon." Daddy Brandon said he's going to teach me how to ride my bike, he announced while we were eating dinner. I nearly choked on my pizza. Who's Daddy Brandon? Mommy's husband, he replied, like I was an idiot. She said I can call him Daddy Brandon because he's kind of my other daddy now. I had to step outside for a few minutes to cool off. When I came back in, I kept my voice light. You know, Bud, you already have a daddy. Me. Maybe it would be less confusing if you just called him Brandon. Gavin shrugged. Mom said I should call him Daddy Brandon because it's more respectful. That night, I texted Alyssa. Can we talk about this Daddy Brandon thing? I'm not comfortable with it. Her reply came an hour later. It came from Gavin. Don't make a big deal out of it. I knew it was bullshit, but what could I do? Force my kid to call the guy something else? That would just confuse him more. So, I gritted my teeth. Again. Meanwhile, I busted my ass to make sure my kids had everything they needed at my place. I got 2 promotions at work. I saved like crazy and managed to buy a modest but nice house in a good school district. My whole life revolved around giving Gavin and Zoe stability and opportunity. Brandon, on the other hand, had the nerve to make passive-aggressive comments at every school event we both attended. One parent-teacher night, I was standing by the science fair projects. Gavin had built a robotic arm that could pick up marbles, a seriously impressive rig, when Brandon sidled up next to me. So man, how's the new car? Must be nice to have so much extra cash when you're only responsible for 2 kids. I drove a 5-year-old used Honda, but whatever. It gets me from A to B, I said, trying to stay calm. Some of us understand what it means to sacrifice for a blended family, he went on, flashing a designer watch that clearly cost more than my car payment. I just walked away. These interactions were constant, but I kept my cool for the kids. There was a school field trip I volunteered to chaperone. So did Brandon. 6 straight hours of listening to him talk about their upcoming vacation to Hawaii, the new gaming console he bought for all the kids, and how hard, but rewarding, it was to raise 4 children. He kept referring to Gavin and Zoe as our kids in front of the other parents, which made my blood boil. During lunch, he sat across from me while the kids were playing. You know, the kids are really struggling with the back and forth, he said, unwrapping his overpriced organic sandwich. Alyssa and I think it would be better for them to have one stable home and just visit you on weekends. I nearly choked on my water. Excuse me. He held up his hands. Just thinking about what's best for them, man. No offense. My custody agreement is not up for negotiation, and certainly not with you, I said, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. He shrugged. Just a thought. Alyssa says you've always put the kids first, so I figured you'd want to know they're struggling. It took superhuman strength not to flip the table. Instead, I got up and went to join my kids, who looked far from struggling as they laughed and played on the jungle gym. The real trouble started when Alyssa began expecting me to treat all her children as if they were mine. It started with small things, like asking me to bring birthday presents for Brandon's daughter when I came to pick up my kids. Don't you think it's rude to show up with gifts for just Gavin and Zoe when Lila is right there? She'd say, as if I were a monster for not buying presents for a child that wasn't mine. Then she suggested I should take Lila with me when I had my weekends with my kids. It's disruptive for the kids when you only take 2 of them, she insisted. They're siblings now. At first, I tried to be diplomatic. I'm glad they're close, but my time with Gavin and Zoe is limited, and I want to focus on them. That did not go over well. Wow, nice way to make a little girl feel left out. Real mature. This emotional blackmail went on for years. I held firm on my boundaries, but I was always painted as the bad guy. Meanwhile, when I picked up my kids, they'd tell me about how Daddy Brandon bought them all tickets to Disney or how they all went on a real family ski trip. One weekend, Gavin was unusually quiet on the drive to my house. When I asked what was wrong, he finally admitted, Mom and Brandon were talking about you last night. They didn't know I was listening. My stomach tightened. What did they say, buddy? He looked out the window. Brandon said you were selfish and that you don't care about our whole family, just about looking like the fun dad. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That's not true, Gavin. I love you and Zoe more than anything in the world. I know, he said softly. I told Mom it was mean, and she told me I shouldn't repeat private conversations. I had to pull over to the side of the road because I was shaking with anger. I took a deep breath, turned around, and looked my son straight in the eye. Gavin, I never want you to feel caught in the middle. If you ever hear something that upsets you, you can always talk to me about it. Okay, no secrets. He nodded, and I saw the relief on his face. Okay, Dad. The subtle jabs about me not being part of their real family made my blood boil, but I never said anything to the kids. They didn't need to be caught in the middle of adult nonsense. As they got older, Alyssa's financial demands became more and more absurd. When they were 7 and 5, Gavin and Zoe showed impressive academic potential. I did my research and found an incredible private school focused on STEM, Westridge Academy. The tuition was steep, $12,000 per child per year, but it was worth every penny for the education they would receive. I proposed to Alyssa that we enroll our kids in this elite school, and I offered to pay 100% of the tuition for both Gavin and Zoe. Instead of being thrilled, she immediately turned it into emotional blackmail about Lila, saying it wouldn't be fair if all three didn't go, that it was divisive. She tried to get me to pay for Brandon's kid, too. I held my ground. I said I was paying for Gavin and Zoe, and the rest was on them. She was furious, but guess what? They enrolled Lila anyway, using money from Brandon's parents. These arguments were constant. Every expense, every opportunity, every gift I gave my own children became a battleground where I was expected to do the same for their half-siblings. Then, this past spring, something finally made me snap. My kids, who are brilliant, by the way, got selected for an ultra-elite tech camp called Tech Future in Colorado. Only 40 kids in the entire country were accepted. 40. And both of my kids were among them. Gavin is a coding prodigy. At 9, he was already creating his own mods for Minecraft. Zoe is a little robotics genius. She won the state competition with a waste-sorting robot she designed herself. I was so proud I was almost in tears. They worked their butts off on their applications. Late nights finishing demo projects, writing essays, making videos, the whole 9 yards. I still remember the moment we submitted the applications. The three of us were huddled around my kitchen table. Gavin was nervously double-checking for typos. Zoe was bouncing in her chair as she uploaded the videos of her robot in action. What if we don't get in, Dad? Gavin asked, his finger hovering over the submit button. Then we'll try again next year. But I think you guys have a great shot, I told him. When the acceptance emails came a month later, we were all together at my house. I let them open my inbox after dinner. The screams when they saw the word congratulations were probably heard 3 blocks away. Zoe literally did a victory dance on the couch, and Gavin just kept rereading the email over and over like he couldn't believe it. I took them out for ice cream and promised them new laptops for the camp. Their excitement was infectious. It was one of those perfect parenting moments where all the sacrifice feels completely worth it. The program costs $7,800 per child, plus flights and equipment, almost $20,000 total. I didn't even blink. I've been saving specifically for their education since the divorce. I drive an old car. I live in a smaller house than I can afford. I skip vacations. Also, they can have opportunities just like this. When I told Alyssa about it during our monthly co-parenting check-in, her reaction said it all. She didn't say congratulations or show any joy for them. She got this calculating look that made my stomach churn. Lila is interested in robotics too, she said, completely ignoring our kids' achievement. Yeah, I said, already sensing where this was going. It would be really great if all 3 of them could have this experience together. I took a long sip of my coffee before I answered. Alyssa, this isn't a family vacation. Gavin and Zoe earned their spots in a highly competitive program. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. There has to be a way to get Lila in too. And you should pay for it, since you're already paying for Gavin and Zoe. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. You want me to pay almost $8,000 for your husband's kid to go to camp? I asked, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Our kids are siblings, she insisted. It's damaging to them when you create these divisions. No, what's damaging is teaching them that hard work doesn't matter and that they're entitled to things they didn't earn. I shot back. Her face hardened. So that's how little you care about their relationship with their sister. They're going to resent you for this. They'll resent you if you keep trying to steal special moments they've earned, I said calmly. This is not negotiable. She stood up, grabbing her purse. We'll see about that. Don't be surprised if the kids start saying they don't want to go without Lila. Are you seriously threatening to manipulate our children over this? She gave me an icy smile. I'm just saying families should stick together. Maybe you've forgotten what that means. I walked out of that coffee shop with my hands shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort of not flipping the table. The sheer audacity. The next day, Gavin called me, upset. Alyssa had told him he shouldn't go to the camp if Lila couldn't. Classic blackmail. I reminded him that he and Zoe had earned their spots and that he shouldn't give that up. He still wanted to go. He just needed to hear it was okay. After the call, I texted Alyssa to stop the manipulation. She replied with a thumbs down emoji. Real mature. But if you think that was the end of it, you don't know Alyssa. 2 days after the camp incident, I'm at work, crushing a presentation I'd been preparing for weeks, when I get a text from Brandon. We need to talk about your contribution to the family housing situation. I almost choked on my coffee. What the hell was this? I ignored it, figuring it was a ridiculous pressure tactic that would pass. But on Friday, when I went to pick up the kids, Alyssa handed me a printed-out Excel spreadsheet with a cover letter like it was the 1990s. While the kids were grabbing their bags, I looked at the spreadsheet. It detailed how I was expected to pay 50% of their $2,400 rent. She claimed my nicer neighborhood created an unequal environment for Gavin and Zoe, and that I needed to cover half their rent for consistency. I reminded her that my house, my money, and their financial situation were absolutely none of my business. She insisted it was for the well-being of the children, as if I hadn't sacrificed my entire life to provide them with stability. Then Brandon swooped in, like a backup choir singer, and had the gall to say that a real man would support their entire household. That's when I realized this was never about the kids. They wanted me to fund their life. I felt a wave of heat wash over me. The nerve of this guy, questioning my manhood while asking me for a handout. I've never been in a fight as an adult, but in that moment, I understood how people get there. You know what a real man does, Brandon? I said, stepping closer. He pays his own damn bills instead of asking his wife's ex-husband to subsidize his lifestyle. Brandon's face turned red. Watch yourself. The kids are right there. Then don't start crap during a custody exchange, I shot back. And for the record, a real man doesn't use children as pawns to extort money. Alyssa stepped between us. This isn't extortion. It's co-parenting, but clearly, you only think about yourself. I laughed, incredulous at the absurdity. Co-parenting doesn't mean I pay your bills, Alyssa. It means we both take care of our kids. Our kids. Not Brandon's kid, not your new baby. Gavin and Zoe. I called the kids to get in the car. As I drove away, I saw Alyssa and Brandon watching from the doorway, both of them furious that their little ambush hadn't worked. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Dad, are you okay? Zoe asked from the back seat. I forced a smile. Yes, sweetie. Just thinking about what movie we should watch tonight. Back at my house, after the kids were in bed, I sat on my deck with a beer, feeling like I was going insane. I called my buddy Caleb, who'd been through a similar divorce. Man, am I the asshole here? Should I be helping them financially? Caleb didn't hesitate. No. You pay for your kids, their expenses, their school, their health insurance. That's your responsibility. Their bills are their problem. But what if the kids are suffering because their house isn't as nice as mine? Are they actually suffering? Do they have food, clothes, their own beds? Yes, of course. Then they're fine. Kids don't care about square footage, man. They care about being loved and feeling secure. Don't let them gaslight you. He was right, of course, but the guilt trips were so constant, so relentless, that sometimes I questioned my own sanity. Was I being selfish? Was I hurting my kids by refusing to play along with this perfect blended family charade? I stayed up half the night, reminding myself that having boundaries doesn't make me a bad father. What I didn't know then was that this was just the warm-up for what was coming. A week after the rent fiasco, I showed up to what I thought was a normal parent-teacher conference, coffee in hand, ready to hear about how great my kids were doing. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Alyssa, Brandon, and the school counselor were sitting there, looking grave. Alyssa had turned it into a surprise intervention. She claimed my inconsistent parenting was emotionally harming the children because I only took my own kids on outings, refused to pay for Lila, and lived in a nicer house. Basically, I was being accused of not funding their happy family fantasy. I stood there in disbelief as Brandon pulled out his phone and showed pictures of their family vacation to San Diego. Look how happy all 4 kids are together. But when he takes just Gavin and Zoe, it creates an artificial separation. I could feel my face getting hot. Every instinct was screaming at me to walk out, but I forced myself to stay. Alyssa started with the waterworks, fake tears and all, claiming Gavin had come home crying because he felt guilty that Lila couldn't go to the camp. A complete lie. He'd been bouncing off the walls with excitement about it for weeks. Then Brandon piled on, saying Zoe was having tantrums because I treated her differently from her siblings. The same guy who barely knows her schedule was suddenly an expert on her emotions. That's when I cut them off. Zoe doesn't have siblings at my house. She has one brother, Gavin. It's not complicated. This is the arrangement you agreed to when you signed the divorce papers. Alyssa shot back. You're refusing to acknowledge the reality of their blended family. I reminded her that their reality was 2 households. This is what you wanted. This is what we have. Brandon then leaned forward. You're just threatened because they have a complete family with us. Punishing the kids for your insecurity isn't fair. I looked him dead in the eye. A complete family? The one where you tell my son he's stuck with you? The one where my daughter is made to feel guilty for being accepted into a program she earned all by herself? Is that your definition of complete? Alyssa started sputtering as if I'd just insulted her entire lineage. I cut her off. Save it. I've seen the texts. I've heard it from the kids. This isn't about their emotional health. It's an attempt to control the narrative and my bank account. They kept repeating the same script, playing the victims, painting me as the bad guy because I refused to bankroll their perfect family fantasy. And when that didn't work, Alyssa finally dropped the mask. If you can't see how your behavior is harmful, then we might have to revisit the custody agreement. We're prepared to file for primary custody on the grounds of emotional neglect. The room went silent. It felt like being plunged into ice water. They were threatening to take my kids from me because I wouldn't pay for their stepdaughter's summer camp, because I wouldn't subsidize their rent. Let's be perfectly clear, I said, my voice calm despite the rage building inside me. I have never, and will never, neglect my children. I have given them every opportunity one possibly can. I have been present for every important moment in their lives. If you're implying otherwise, you better have more evidence than the fact that I won't pay for Brandon's kids' summer camp. Alyssa smiled. We have plenty to document your refusal to support a healthy, blended family environment. The courts take that very seriously these days. Something in me snapped. Not in a fit of rage, but with cold, absolute clarity. For years, I had been playing defense, trying to keep the peace, biting my tongue. For what? For them to try and take my kids away. I stood up. I calmly gathered my things and looked Alyssa straight in the eye. We're done. Any future communication regarding custody will go through my attorney. I walked out, my heart pounding in my chest. I got to my car, shut the door, and just sat there for a minute, my hands trembling. They were threatening to take my kids. My kids. I felt a strange mix of panic, rage, and weirdly, relief. Relief because the gloves were finally off. No more gray areas, no more benefit of the doubt. From the parking lot, I made 2 calls. One to the best family law attorney in the city, and another to my buddy Caleb, who works in digital forensics. Over the next month, I went into total stealth mode. On the surface, nothing changed. I kept the same custody schedule, remained cordial at drop-offs, and didn't take the bait on Alyssa's provocative texts. I just smiled and nodded like everything was fine. But behind the scenes, I was building a fortress. Caleb recovered every deleted text between Alyssa and me from the past 3 years. Every manipulative message, every demand, every threat, all documented. I compiled financial statements showing everything I'd paid for the kids since the divorce, including school tuition, medical bills, and extracurriculars. I recorded every conversation at drop-offs and pickups, which is legal in my state with one-party consent. I kept the letter demanding rent payment and all the other written demands. My lawyer had teachers and coaches write affidavits about my involvement in the kids' lives. One particular afternoon stands out. I was at Gavin's coding competition, sitting in the audience, when I spotted Brandon and Alyssa across the room. They hadn't seen me. I watched as Brandon checked his watch repeatedly, looking bored out of his mind, while Gavin was on stage presenting his project. The second Gavin finished, Brandon got up and headed for the exit while Alyssa was still clapping. I recorded the whole thing on my phone. I even installed a dash cam in my car that recorded conversations during custody exchanges. It captured gems like Brandon telling the kids, Your dad just doesn't understand how families work, or Alyssa adding. Maybe if we ask Santa, he'll convince your dad to stop being so selfish about the camp. My lawyer took one look at the mountain of evidence I handed her and started organizing it like she'd been waiting for this moment forever. No questions, no hesitation, she just got to work. Every receipt I'd saved, every boundary they'd crossed, she lined it all up like chess pieces. I didn't need a pep talk. I could see it in the way she moved. The case was solid, and they were about to find out how badly they had miscalculated. I stayed up late after the kids were in bed, cataloging all this evidence, writing down every detail I could remember from past conversations. Some nights, I'd look up and realize it was 3 a.m. and I had to be up for work in 3 hours. I was exhausted, but I was running on a primal need to protect my relationship with my kids. There were moments of doubt, of course. Nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, wondering if I was being petty, if this would all just hurt the kids more in the long run. But every time, I remembered one crucial thing. I didn't start this fight. They did. They threatened to take my children. There was no going back from that. Meanwhile, Alyssa was getting bolder, convinced her threats had worked. She sent me a formal email, which went straight into my evidence file, demanding I pay $8,500 for Lila to attend a comparable summer program for the sake of equity. I didn't even bother to reply. Then she started CCing her sister and her mother on emails about the kids, creating an echo chamber where everyone would reply all about what a terrible father I was for not supporting the whole family. My favorite was from her mom. A real father would want all the children to have the same opportunities. Shame on you. I forwarded it all to my lawyer without comment. The real turning point came when Gavin texted me late one night. Dad, can I come over tomorrow instead of Friday? Mom and Brandon are fighting about money again. Brandon said you should man up and help them since they're stuck with your kids half the time. Reading those words felt like getting hit with a baseball bat. Stuck with my kids. As if they were a burden. I screenshotted the text, even though it broke my heart to use my son's words as evidence. The next day, I picked Gavin up early. In the car, he told me Brandon had claimed I had a nicer house because I wasn't supporting a real family, and that I had made Lila cry by refusing to pay for her camp. Does it bother you when you hear that? I asked him. He nodded. It makes me feel like we're a problem, but I know we're not. That was the last straw, the point of no return. I filed for 70/30th custody with strict communication boundaries and a requirement that everything go through a court-monitored app. When they got the papers, my phone blew up. Calls, texts, even from her mom. I answered nothing. 2 days later, Alyssa cornered me. Is this about the camp? I told her bluntly, no. It's about you and Brandon using our children as weapons because I refuse to fund your life. She stammered out some weak excuse. I cut her off. Save it for the judge. From now on, you go through my lawyer or the app. A week later, Brandon tried to confront me in the school parking lot, spouting his usual crap about lawyers and selfishness. I didn't even give him a look. I just pointed to the dash cam that was recording everything. He shut up immediately and walked away without another word. The weeks leading up to the hearing were tense. Alyssa and Brandon love-bombed the kids with gifts out of nowhere, amusement park trips on a weekday, and letting them stay up way past their bedtime. These were classic parental alienation tactics. I documented it all and never brought it up with the kids. On my end, I kept our routine stable. Homework first, then fun. Consistent bedtimes. Home-cooked meals. The boring, steady parenting kids actually need. My lawyer prepped me. They're going to paint you as controlling, jealous of their happy family. Don't take the bait. Let the evidence speak. 6 weeks later, in court, I was ready, and the evidence spoke for itself. The texts, the financial demands, the recordings, even the kids' own words about the pressure they felt. Alyssa's lawyer looked blindsided. The judge was completely unimpressed with their excuses, especially after reading the text where Brandon called my children a burden. Their attempt to paint me as an uncooperative parent backfired spectacularly. The judge was clear. I had zero obligation to support children who weren't mine, and their threats were a clear case of manipulation. The final verdict was 70/30th custody in my favor. Strict communication rules and an official confirmation that I owed nothing for their so-called blended family. The kicker? They had to pay all of my legal fees, every single cent of the $14,380. As I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd finally stopped letting them write the rules. Once the legal storm passed, I bought a house closer to the academy. It was modest, functional, and all ours. I set up a tech room for the kids, gave them their own space, and on the first night, we built gaming PCs and stayed up way too late playing Minecraft. Pizza on the floor, beanbags, no furniture yet, and more peace than I'd felt in years. From then on, all communication went through the parenting app. No more surprise texts, no more fake emergencies, no more emotional blackmail. Everything was on the record. Alyssa hated it. I didn't care. The kids thrived. They were more relaxed, more open, no more walking on eggshells. Zoe even asked me once if it was okay for her to be happy with me. I told her it always had been. As they were unpacking, I had a courier deliver the $14,380 legal bill to Alyssa and Brandon's house with a note. My commitment is to my children, not your lifestyle. Petty, maybe? Necessary? Absolutely. Gavin and Zoe killed it at tech camp. They were even invited back as junior mentors. I sent the acceptance letters through the app with no comment. Just facts. 6 months later, things are quiet. Gavin got into an elite coding program at 13. Zoe's robotics team is heading to the national championships, and I'm finally rediscovering who I am outside of the chaos. I've started seeing someone. She's a teacher, smart, grounded, and has zero drama. That first date felt surreal. No custody talk, no emotional landmines, just actual conversation. But the moment that made it all truly worthwhile happened one night while Gavin and I were coding. He looked up from his computer and said, "I'm glad you stood up to Mom and Brandon. It was getting weird before." That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Not just for me, for them. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living, and no one is ever going to drain me dry again. Comment. Watching this story reminds us that true strength isn't about being loud, but about standing firm in what's right. Setting boundaries isn't an act of aggression, but a necessary step to protect your peace and the well-being of those you love. When we prioritize the emotional safety of our children, we are teaching them exactly how they deserve to be treated by others. You should never feel guilty for refusing to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. It takes immense courage to walk away from chaos and rebuild a life shaped by stability instead of conflict. Peace is a choice we make every single day, often by simply saying no to what drains our energy. Healing begins the moment you decide that your dignity is not up for negotiation. I hope this encourages you to evaluate where you might need to draw your own lines to protect your happiness. Remember that you are worthy of a life filled with genuine respect and quiet joy. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.